Everybody for joining us this afternoon. My name is Patrick Jaramillo and I work for the American Friends Service Committee here in New Mexico. And I want to welcome you to this installment of this digital learning circle, peer-to-peer learning circle. I see a lot of new faces and new names out here. So for you all, I'm just going to give a brief background or intro to the American Friends Service Committee. So it is a Quaker organization that works towards peace and lasting justice. It's a peace and justice organization. It's founded in 1917 and has been working in New Mexico since 1976 and been working accompanying land-based people towards their work towards self-determination, and always with a particular attention to land and water. And in the last 15 years, I think we've been very intentionally working on farming and food. And we have normally do things very face-to-face. We have been doing trainings and small gatherings on farms, and it's a very relational way of doing things. Now, one of the things we've been doing for the last 10 years is holding a farmer-to-farmer gathering. And obvious reasons we can't do that this year. So we're trying to take advantage of the technology and bring people together online. And so we're hosting this series of peer-to-peer or farmer-to-farmer learning circles where we can still get together virtually and share some information and learn from each other. So that being said, that's what we're doing this for the foreseeable future until we can get together again. And until then, we hope we find this helpful and get something out of this, and we can reach a lot more people this way than we used to on the farms. But so that's a perk. Anyway, with that, I'm just going to hand that over, pass this on to my colleague Angelina, who will give you the introduction of the rest of this installment, this session. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Angelina. Welcome. We're so glad that you all have come. So today we're going to be talking about how healthy soils can really make a big impact on the climate crisis. We're going to hear from two farmers who use regenerative farming practices. Regenerative farming practices are a set of farming techniques that help foster soil biodiversity. It's really amazing. So healthy soil can have, in 1 teaspoon of healthy soil, you can have over 7 billion microbes. And it's those microbes that help soil be really productive. And they can also store a really large amount of carbon. So our two farmers are Fidel Gonzalez. He's been a farmer since 2009. I was in the AFSC farming training program with him, and we both graduated. And he's also the president of the Agricultura Network, which is a farmer co-op here in town. And he will share his experience farming and learning from farmers in India about no-till, and then bringing that information back to New Mexico and finding a low-till method that works for him here. Our other farmer, Matthew Draper, has been farming since 2015, and he's the farm manager of North Valley Organics. He'll share cover cropping techniques and a crop planning system as to how he grows healthy soil and also an economically viable farm. And with no further ado, we'll turn it over to Fidel.
Right on. Hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Fidel Gonzalez. As Angelina said, I'm one of the farmers from the South Valley, Albuquerque, New Mexico. who was born as a farmer through American Friends Service Committee a few years ago, 12, 13 years ago. And I wanted to talk to you about some of the things I've been learning myself through the experience mostly. In this case, talking about tilling, low tilling, and no tilling. We're not gonna just focus on one specific one. We're gonna use about the benefits of all of them as much as we can. So what will be the main purpose? The main purpose of non-tilling, as Angelina mentioned, the quantity of microorganisms that we can find in a just single spoon of good quality soil versus the bad quality one. How did we get a bad quality soil? Is by using too much machinery, too much rotor tiller, too much tractor work to the soil. So what would be the main purpose of no tilling as well as low tilling would be to preserve the quality of the soil the best we can, as much as we can. So how do we do that? By trying not to hurt the soil too much. Just as a comment to let you know, the structure of the soil has the same structure of the human gut. And the less we disturb the human gut, the better kind of bacteria and viruses that we need and we will have. But exactly the same thing happens with the soil. So after years, the first 3 years when I was farming, I was using the rotor tiller a lot. I mean, I thought at one point that tilling was really, like the formula to have a good quality land where I can put my seeds on. But I didn't know. Like I told you, when I started this project 12 years ago, I didn't know anything about farming. Anyway, as you can see it right there, in one point after you use the tiller too much, the only thing that happens really is that all that powder that we are producing with the machine, when you water it, it goes to the bottom of the soil, clogging the soil for breathing. And when that happens, we start to create chunks of mud versus good quality humus soil. And in this case, the best quality humus, which is the first 4 inches when you work with your soil, you will see that the first layer of soil on top looks like kind of a little darker than the one at the bottom. That's the humus, and that's where we find the best quality soil, talking about microorganisms. So what happens when we till a lot is that all of those good benefit organisms that we need for farming, they go to the bottom. And that is exactly the same thing that happens when we till a lot with using tractor tilling, or just that happens that there we go. When we use the tractor a lot, plowing and tilling, we're just flipping the good quality soil to the bottom of where we don't need it. So what is the benefit of one and the other? So the benefit of no tilling as well as low tilling is that we're not going to disturb the soil as much as using the machines a lot. So by using the machines, it is all right. What I've been noticing in my practice is that we have to really have a nice balance of equipment and non-equipment. So we have to be honest and realistic about how much can we do just with our own hands, and like tools like shovels and hoes that will help us to be able to work with the land, versus using a tiller. Of course, if you have to plant 2-3 acres, we're going to have to require to use some of those machines, but the less we use it, the better. So that's when we talk about low tilling. We don't have to use it all the time, every time we're going to be working with preparing the land, preparing the soil. But if we really need to, we will have to. So in my case, I use mostly the machines. I will say a couple of times a year versus 20 times that I was doing it before. I was just using that tiller over and over. And as you can see it now, the one before, Angelina, with the brad fork, that is something that had been turned into one of my practices, farming practices, to be sure that we're gonna preserve the quality of the soil. Brad forking will be mostly, the best way to make the soil breathe. And that's what we want. We want air going through to the microorganisms to be able to do their job. So breaking the soil with brad forks, preparing the soil with brad forks, and then by the end, because we definitely, I don't know if we can see one of the ones that we have already planted, where I really like to keep on right there. I really like to do the high beds I was trained to use, because it really make it easier for me, and it also keeps the humidity when we water so much better. So after we break the soil with a brad fork, and then we dig the trenches, creating the high beds, then I put the nutrients on top of the beds, which whatever, into the organic system that we follow. The nutrients that are welcome, feather meal, bone meal, blood meal. Then I use the tiller. And I only do it like once, and that's it. And then that works for half of the year. Then with my crop rotation, I move along just by breaking the soil again with a brad fork, and find out how to do it just with my hands. And I forgot to put some of the photos from another tool that we create right here. I don't know if you guys know the one that looks like stars, and they are like interconnected to each other. They call it the cultivator. Well, we create one with 3 of those, and it's basically a hand tiller. It doesn't require any gas or any electricity. It just requires human power to push and pull. And that really helps a lot to mix the nutrients that we use for farming. Right there, that photo that you can see with the plants, that happens when the soil gets sick. And that is exactly, once again, what happens when our gut gets sick. It's easy for us to get any kind of diseases. And it is exactly the same formula with the soil. If the soil is kind of weak and it doesn't have the right nutrients, and it doesn't have a way to preserve its own way of living, that's what we get. We get some kind of pest. Right there is just a nice, beautiful aphids that we could control in one point. But even that, you can see there's an overload of aphids. And that was at the beginning where we were using the tiller a lot. I hadn't had that problem in the past 5 or 6 years since I start to work with low tilling. Low tilling completely will help me to, first of all, take care of my first instrument, my first tool, which is my body. Because we have to be realistic again. If you have to work with a whole bunch of land like there, you have to work with so much quantity of land, and thinking about no tilling and just do brad forking and hand digging, it will really hurt yourself. So we're trying to find out a balance, between taking care of the soil and taking care of ourselves, so no one is going to get damaged. So tilling a lot versus no tilling, I don't want to be too extremist, so I get in the middle with low tilling. I use the machines really just when it is a requirement for me to be able to finish the planting. And like I told you, from 16 to 20 times that we used to do it a year to a couple of times now a year, I think that we have been having a nice increase of taking care of the soil. So as I told you, what happens when you till a lot, the soil gets sick, and it's easier for the soil to get diseases, to get pests, to get dry, and you just get chunks of mud where we cannot be able to plant again. And when is the right time to use it? Like I told you, at the beginning of the season for me, like right now that we are preparing the 2021, what I'm doing right now is after we plant cover crop, we start to just cut all the cover crop with machetes, let all that organic matter on top of the beds, and then put the nutrients on top of it, and then just go ahead and till it once, and that's it. And that really helps me a lot. And then in the middle of the year, or whenever my crops are required to be moved out of the soil and prepared to have it ready for the next crop, for the rotation crop that we do. If it's something that doesn't really needs to use the machine, I don't use it. For example, if we have a bed of salad mix or spinach or arugula, and the next thing I'm going to plant is chard or kale or collard greens, I don't really need to use the tiller, because that's, as you know, we plant that a foot apart, 2 feet apart. So it doesn't really require to have machinery involved. We just cut the leftover of the greens with a hoe, like the one you can see in the photo. Just cut it and then mix everything, hand mix it, and transplant whatever we have to plant or transplant for the next season of growing. So talk about humus. The humus, once again, the humus is those 4 first inches that we have on top of the soil, where we will find the best quality of microorganisms that we need for the whole season. So the best with the less we disturb those microorganisms, the better quality soil we're gonna have through the year. And then also that would also help us not to let the soil rest for too long. So basically what I've been learning through the biodynamics, we can use the soil for 9 months and then just let it rest 3 months. 3 months. 3 months are good enough for the soil to be ready and prepared for the next season. So let's say, for example, whenever we plant outside in open spaces, I go all the way from March to November, and then we cover crop it December, January, February, and that's more than good enough. That's all I need to keep on going. And just to let you know, a while ago when I was tilling a lot, in one point I had to let the cold frame that I own right here at the back of my house rest for a whole year because it was totally damaged. I mean, you couldn't plant anything on it because all you will see was just like chunks and chunks of mud. What you can see right now, right there in that photo, is the way the people does it, like some other countries, in this case, India, they only use, you know, their version of what we have here as shovels. That's their version. That's what they use the whole time. Everyone carries one, and that's how you see them working all the time, just with a single tool, and it doesn't require rotor tilling or tractor work. But then let's go back again to the point of when is it good that we can till and when is it good that we cannot. As you can see it, countries with poor economy like India, in this case, labor is so cheap. It is so cheap that you can replace really humans for machines for really peanuts. I mean, that's one of the things that it is no such a good to say, but that's the reality. In one way, it's good because they provide jobs to the communities, but on the other hand, their payment is so cheap that they can hire a whole bunch of people. If we try to hire someone or people from the community right here to do no tilling, that's going to be a whole lot of money for us to pay it. And that's the part where we have to be realistic. How much can I do, you know, that I can keep the economy on moving without me losing on the business? So if I want to have healthy soil and a healthy body, I'm going to have to use those machines from time to time. If you have the opportunity of no tilling, of course, I will recommend it at 100%. But in this case, you have to figure out if you are really like a full-time farmer if you are just a part-time farmer and you do something else, or if you just do farming as a pastime. Who really lives out of this? Like in this case, Matthew and myself, I know that we do live out of farming. So we have to put in a balance, you know, the idea of how to keep the economy on moving. So if we're trying to invest a lot of money, pay some money to help us no tilling, we're gonna lose our income just in that. But once again, low tilling, just use it the less possible, will keep the soil really healthy, will keep myself healthy because I hurt my back already once. I don't want to go through it again. And it will keep the economy on moving. So once again, the benefits of tilling the less, better quality soil, better quality produce, better quality crops, and the economy will keep on moving as well as us. It definitely benefits the community because if we are healthy, we're going to be able to keep on producing jobs and good quality food for the community the way we're doing it. So taking care of the soil will also help us to prevent disease for the community because, even if we are organics, but the quality of the food is not that good, it's some of the percentage of the benefits lost already. So that's one of the things I wanted to say. Another thing I wanted to mention is the price on the machines. Not everyone has the money to buy a tractor. Not everyone has the money to when do you till? That's a nice question. I think that we're going to have some time after we finish the talking, and we're going to allow you to ask some questions. We're going to be able to keep an answer. So far, we're just going to go through the topic, and then we will definitely remain here to answer some of the questions. So once again, the price on the machines. The cheapest you can get a rototiller, and something that will help you just to do some small job. It can go from $500 to $3,000, $4,000, and a small rototiller. But prices on tractors, well, that's another thing. So not everyone has the capacity, economically speaking, of getting that kind of equipment that will help to speed the farming. If you have it, great. If you don't, well, try to do as much as you can with whatever you have around you. But in either case, once again, I will totally, at least right here in the South Valley, the way we do it, the way I have been doing it, is to keep a balance between equipment and non-equipment. So it won't hurt the soil as much as using it for so many times. I think I'm under my time, Zaira. Is that all right? Or
yes, that just leaves more. Yep, that leaves more time for questions at the end. So thank you, Fidel.
All right, thank you.
And we'll let Matthew go next, and there will be plenty of time for questions at the end. So thank you for everyone who's asking questions in the chat. I'll be watching for those.
All right, thanks everyone. My name is Matthew Draper. I'm, as they said, I'm a farmer here in the North Valley of Albuquerque, and my farm is called North Valley Organics. I've been doing it for about 6 years. Yeah, what I'm going to talk about today is the way that we apply some different principles of soil health on our farm. So we've done a little bit of work with the NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and they have a soil health division, and they have 5 principles of soil health that they recommend on their farm. And me as a small farmer, we farm about 3 acres in the North Valley, which it's a lot of land for doing vegetables, and it's also a small amount of land, for trying to make a living as a farmer. Building healthy soil is kind of a no-brainer for me, because without healthy soil, I won't get enough production to make ends meet. So me and then the guy standing next to the peas here is Miner Morgan. He's been my partner in a lot of this and my farming mentor. So me and him have both worked really hard to apply these 5 principles to our farm. 5 principles that were, developed by the USDA soil health team and really put in practice by many farmers for generations. And I think, like you heard Fidel say, all of this is about trying to find a balance between what's good for the soil and what's good for you. And usually what's good for the soil is also good for you. But if you apply anything to the extreme, you might end up growing really great soil and not very much food, which would also mean that you couldn't be a farmer. You couldn't be in business. So yeah, so this is about the 5 principles that we have tried to apply on our farm, and I'll talk a little bit about the balancing act we've had to do. So if you want to go to the next slide, we'll look at the principles. Yeah, so these are the 5 principles of healthy soil, and they're all, what I like about looking at them as principles is that each farm is different in a different context. And so the way that I apply them on my farm might not work for, folks in other parts of New Mexico, or definitely, even other parts of the country. But the principles apply almost universally. So, there may be specifics of your farm or your garden that are different from mine, but the principles can easily be adapted to different situations. And I think, honestly, one of the most difficult things about following all 5 principles is that there's so many habits that our culture has bred into us that says this is how you farm and this is how you grow things, that are at odds with these principles. But I've found that once you start applying them, they all really start working together as one whole system. And yeah, so let's go to the next slide, principle number 1. So the first principle is to keep the soil covered at all times. What Fidel was alluding to, and then Angelina, about all the microorganisms you can find in a scoop of soil. The best way for microorganisms to multiply is for them not to be exposed directly to the elements. And so I guess something that's behind all of these 5 principles and the way that we apply them is that we're trying to shift the paradigm for a farm from like chemical farmers, where you measure your phosphorus and your nitrogen and your potassium and then you add more, to biological farmers, where you're more concerned about the diversity of organisms in your soil, because a diversity of organisms in your soil will produce those nutrients that we can measure in chemistry. So one of the most important for multiplying those microorganisms is keeping the soil covered. So this is some of the ways that we do it on our farm. I'll talk more about this later, but just like Fidel mentioned, we do a balance of, we call ourselves a minimal till farm, definitely not a no-till, because we find that tilling really helps reduce the weeding that we have to do. So as you can see in both of these pictures here, we grow a row of cash crops. So in the picture on the left, you see there's carrots going down the middle, and then I have tomatoes on either side of that. And then in between those cash crop rows, we have a walkway row where we grow a perennial cover crop. And so that means that there's something growing in every single square inch of our farm, and something that's somewhat intentional, although the perennial cover crop is often just what pops up there, although I do try to seed clover and other native grasses. But this means that every square inch of the farm is protected, so when heavy rains come and when the hot sun of summer comes, that the microorganisms have somewhere to hide. And so the way we accomplish that on our cash crop rows is we use this permeable weed cloth that you can see here. It's the black thing between the carrots, and then you see we cut out big holes for our tomatoes, and then the tomatoes get a straw mulch around around that circle where you see the dirt. So, you know, I find that after a tillage event, tilling it's like hurting the soil a little bit, that when you cover it right away, you can feel like you're healing it. You're putting some neosporin on that cut or something. So we use a permeable weed cloth, which I find is a great alternative to the black plastic that's used in some of organic agriculture. Really lets the water get through and lets the soil breathe. And then if you go to the next slide, my favorite thing to use is straw mulch. So this is our garlic on the right here. And then on the left, you can kind of see a row of tomatoes with straw inside the tomato cages. I think that as far as keeping the soil covered, straw mulch just has done wonders for soils that I've worked on. So I use straw mulch as much as I can, but there is a cost prohibitiveness to trying to straw mulch 3 acres worth. And so that's where we've opted for the black permeable weed cloth. It's called a landscaping cloth. And I was skeptical when we first started using it. It was something that Miner had suggested that we use because it'll help reduce the weeding. And I was very idealistic in my early days, and I said, no black plastic. I don't want any plastic. But I did some soil temperature measurements, and I found that beds that I had just left bare and exposed to the soil were much hotter. The soil temperature was much hotter, and the plants were much less happy than where we put down this this permeable landscaping cloth, which it's kind of like a synthetic mulch. So I really had good luck with that, and yeah, you know, that's our approach on our farm, is to keep every single square inch of the soil covered. And you know, let's go to the next slide and talk about the next principle. So number 2, Fidel talked a lot about this, so I won't dig in too deeply. Minimize soil disturbance is, you know, try to minimize tilling. And I think we always talk about the idea that tillage is really, can be seen on a spectrum. I think it doesn't have to be no-till or all-till, but especially in organic agriculture, you can start to rely on tilling as a crutch. Oh, there's weeds here, let's till them. Oh yeah, they're, you know, and when you start tilling too much, you really do see the consequences. So when we till, we always try to till in just a strip, and then we leave the middle spaces undisturbed. So you can see this is what our fields look like in the spring. Before we put any weed cloth or anything down, there's a strip of tilled soil where the cash crops are going to grow, and then a strip of untilled soil. And just an anecdote, I tried, before I got into farming, I had a big garden, and one year I read the One Straw Revolution, which is all about no-till, and I said, okay, no tillage in my garden. I didn't even take a shovel to it, like nothing. I just stuck seeds in the heavy clay soil, and it was the absolute worst yields I've ever gotten as a farmer. So because the weeds overwhelmed my crops, and then some things just wouldn't germinate because the clay was so locked in. So there are benefits to tillage. They just have to be weighed against the damage that they cause to the soil microorganisms. Outside we use a rototiller like this in strips, like the one on top. And then in our hoop houses, we use the broad fork, much like Fidel does. Again, if we were trying to do 3 acres with a broad fork, it's possible, but yeah, the toll on our bodies and the amount of time spent is probably not worth it. So let's move to the next slide. Number 3, the principle number 3 is to maximize plant diversity. This is something that a lot of us market gardeners, small scale farmers do already, because we love to grow lots of different vegetables, and there's a market for that. But one thing that I really like about our system is that with this perennial cover crop in between our rows, I have a bunch of perennial flowers and forbs and grasses that that otherwise wouldn't be there. And I really think that it's those perennial plants that harbor some of some of the deepest and healthiest soil structure. Yeah, I really encourage folks to think about any place in your garden or your farm where something isn't growing. Well, what can you grow there? Because often when you don't grow something there, then the weeds will pop up and they can cause more trouble than, than good. Another thing you can see in this picture is that we have to deal with lots of trees around the edges of our farm, and I try to think of them as a help, although sometimes their roots get in and cause me a lot of grief when they, strangle a bed of tomatoes that doesn't grow as well as I'd like. But we prune the elm trees around the edges of our farm, and then we chip them up once a year, and we can use those wood chips as mulch for perennials that we grow, like we have a peach orchard and a blackberry patch. So I think the goal with this principle is just to try and perennialize our systems as much as we can. Since we grow so many annual crops, that's where the tendency to overtill gets in, and also to reduce that plant diversity. Next slide is, this is just a picture of the sunflowers that we grow. I'm not sure what the right word is, but I love these sunflowers. These are the wild sunflowers, and I'm pretty sure that the pollinators that live around us do as well. So we try to let as many of the wild sunflowers grow as we can. Again, if you were to take this to the extreme, you would let them grow everywhere because they have tried to take over certain beds. So I have to cut lots of them and weed them out. But the more you can leave them around the edges, I think the happier the whole system is, including the soil. So the next principle that we try to follow is to keep a living root in the soil. The best way to do this is with cover crops, and this is where we've thought a lot about the perennializing of agriculture, because the idea is that microbes always, like us, microbes need to eat year round and they need shelter year round. And so when you grow an annual crop, and I think Fidel mentioned this, when you grow from March to October, well, there's still those other months of the year, and you'll lose a lot of microbes if you don't have a place for them to go. So we try to cover crop as much as we can. It's sometimes a challenge to find the time, and of course it is an extra expense, but speaking of expenses, we don't really use fertilizer on our farm except for lots of compost and cover crops. I like to think of it as just an alternate expense to chemical fertilizer or whatever. I have up here in the left corner my preferred mix of overwinter cover crops, because I think like Fidel, I need to use every bed I have during the growing season, but then there is that overwinter time, and I've had real good success with this mix, which I get from Pawnee Butte Seed Company. They send it to me as a mix, but I'm sure there's other ways to get it. In this picture, you can see I'm in a tractor tilling the field, and then you can see there's garlic on either side of where the little orange bump of the tractor is. And then down the middle is some winter wheat and winter rye, and most likely some of the turnips and radish. You just can't see them. But they get pretty tall by April, and it's really a lot of organic material that I'm able to put back into the soil. So it's an extra hassle in the fall to put the seed down, but in the spring you're sure happy you did. So
can I ask a question?
Go for it.
So because a lot of that gets really tall, to put it back in the soil, are you having to till it or tractor it in?
Yeah, we till it in. If you have a small tiller, I would mow it first with a lawnmower and then till it. So so I have access to a tractor scale tiller, and so that'll just take care of it. Yeah, again, it's like Fidel said, there's a real balance here. I myself actually don't own a tractor. I can't afford to buy a tractor. I can't afford to pay the loan with the income I get from farming. But I do have access to one. One of our landowners, lets me use it from time to time. So, that's
basically you're tilling it maybe once a year after the winter, so that you're doing low till.
Right. So what I was going to say is that the fact that I don't own that tractor means that I have to be kind of judicious with when I use it and I have to plan ahead. So yeah, there's a couple weekends in the spring when I make sure, when I have the tractor on site, and then I use it to till everything in. Let's go to the next slide. Oh yeah, this is what it looks like in the fall. So this is a bed of sweet potatoes, or it was a bed of sweet potatoes, and it became a bed of cover crops. And with the sweet potatoes, we pull them up with a plow. And so we just put the cover crop right back in. And again, it feels like you're healing the soil after, you've scratched it a little bit. Hopefully I haven't wounded it too bad, but I can at least make it feel better. So yeah, and then the last principle, if you want to go to the next slide, is incorporate animals and insects. And I wish that on my 3-acre plot I had room for grazing animals, because I hear all the great things they do to the soil. But I need every space I can get to grow vegetables. And I think there might be room for some poultry one day. So we really work on fostering insect habitat. This orb weaver spider over here is one of our farm mascots. They usually come out in August with the monsoon rains, and yeah, and they just sort of bring joy to us. So I put that on, and some other pictures of insects. I want to mention that this white flower here is a carrot flower. So one of the things that we do. Sorry, we're having, my 3-year-old is really wants something. Yeah. So anyway, what I love about growing carrot seed is that it's seed that I can use. And then it attracts so many insects. We let about 10 feet of carrots go to seed every year. So it's not a very big area that we're letting grow. And we get tons of seed from those 10 feet. And we also attract, when the carrots are in bloom, I see 20 different kinds of insects on each carrot flower. So yeah, let's go to the next slide. Yeah, so the last thing I was going to talk about is, how do we make this all work with the imperative of trying to make a living and actually make this farming thing profitable. Even at the higher prices I get, because we can sell locally, I find farming to be a very it's a business that's right on the edge. It's not something that you can do and put away lots of money comfortably. So I've developed, well, I don't want to take credit for these. I've learned how to use some tools that really help me manage all this diversity that I'm committed to growing, and also to understanding, what's working for me economically and what's not. So I just wanted to show folks first, this is the kind of plan that I make in the spring to decide what things I'm going to plant where. And over the years, I've learned to make this more and more detailed. So I used to just put, you can see here, so the green, this is outside the green and yellow, and then the purple is in the hoop house. And I used to just put tomatoes, sweet potatoes, salad, tomatoes. But over the years, I've realized it's helpful to go into what kind of tomatoes, and then you see in parentheses the variety, and then you see some of the hold on one second, Elias, okay, and then I'll tell you. And then I put in the amount of feet that each variety is going to get in a row. So I go to this level of detail. I don't always follow this because things happen, and sometimes I don't have enough seeds, or the squirrel eats my tomato starts like they did last year. But I find it really helpful to have a plan. So yeah, and then once I have this plan, then I can get a total of how many feet of each kind of crop I'm planting. Feet being the number, like the length of my rows, so how many linear feet of tomatoes I have, and I break that down by variety. If you'll go to the next spreadsheet, and so then what happens is in the fall when I start harvesting, I make sure to weigh everything. So this is just an example. This isn't a full-size spreadsheet, but so for example, on August 3rd, I write here the number of pounds that we harvested. So you see here that there's the Chadwick cherry, and we got 37 pounds of that on August 3rd, and then the Prescott, we got 22 pounds, etc. And then I have a total over here. And then I do that so I don't enter these into the spreadsheet. We have this in a logbook because I'm in the field and I don't have time to be on a computer. But I put this in a logbook, and then I come back at the end of the year and I translate the logbook onto the spreadsheet. And then if you'll go down to the bottom of the spreadsheet, then you can see it gives me a total yield number for each variety. And then I have the number of feet that I planted of each variety. And then that gives me a number of how many pounds per foot I harvested. And then I figure out, well, how much money am I getting per pound of tomatoes? And that gives me the number that I really use, which is down here in the black and the gray. This is the income per linear foot, and it's for a given variety of tomato. And the black is just for those 3 weeks that you saw on the top here, and the gray is for the whole year. And seeing these numbers has really helped me make decisions on the farm, and sometimes surprising ones, because there's a bias that you have when you plant a lot of something. You're going to harvest a lot of that one thing. So one year we planted like 2,000 feet of sweet potatoes. And I was so excited about the sweet potatoes, and we got a lot of sweet potatoes. But when I looked at the numbers, I found that I was getting about $3 a foot from sweet potatoes. And you can see here these numbers for the tomatoes. Like last year, I got $5.50 from the cherry tomatoes. And that was actually a kind of a struggle of a year because, as I mentioned, we had a squirrel attack in our greenhouse in the spring. And you can also see from these numbers that the hoop house cherry tomatoes just went bonkers. I mean, that's almost 3 times the yield of the other tomato varieties. So on those days when the hoop house, in June, when the hoop house is super hot and no one wants to work in there, it gives me a reason to keep going. Yeah, so I find this a really useful economic tool to use. And this spreadsheet just shows the different varieties of tomatoes, but you can also look at different crops. So if you go to the last spreadsheet, what I figured out is this is a projection for this year based on last year's numbers. But I have decisions to make about how many feet of cherry tomatoes and how many feet of peas am I going to plant. And so I can put these in. So the B column is the number of feet, and then the C column is my expected dollars per foot. And so then the D column is what I expect to make. And so that gives me a sense of, you know, what kind of sales I'm going to get. And so I can change the numbers of feet over here, and I can watch the money change, and it really helps me make those decisions. You know, so it's actually been, you know, the sweet potatoes have been so popular. We grow them and everyone loves them and they sell so easily. But from looking at these money things, I've learned that I don't need to dedicate half my field to them, that they're a good thing to have at the end of the year. But you know, the real money is, well, honestly, the real money is in the diversity. Because if any one of these things fails, something else will prop me up. Yeah, that's some of the tools I use to manage all this diversity. So yeah, thank you guys for your attention, and yeah, my kids, thank you as well.
Thank you, Matthew and Fidel, and for juggling that with a 3-year-old. It's a fun and tough age. There's been great questions and comments and conversation in the chat, it's wonderful to see so many folks here who are growing food. So we do have a few minutes now. We have about 10 minutes we'd like to take for people to ask questions. A couple of folks got their questions answered, but the way we'll do it is if you could put your question in the chat. There is more than 50 of us on, so it's hard for me to see whose hand is raised, and we don't want people to talk over each other. So if you could put your question in the chat with either Fidel or Matthew's name or both, that would help us. There is this poll. We'd like to know if this information was useful. So if you would fill out the poll, we can show you the answers. But I know that there were some questions at the very beginning for Fidel. And so we'll take about 10 minutes for questions and answers. And just so happy to see folks from all over our state here, and really appreciate Fidel and Matthew sharing their knowledge. So let's see, there was a question from, scrolling back through, there's definitely been a lot of questions about, is this recorded? This was recorded. We will send it out to you and we'll put it on our webpage, which is afsc.org/New Mexico, and we'll send that to you. So that's been a common question. That's a good sign that you all found this helpful and want to share it with folks. There were some questions, Fidel, about the tools that you were talking about and where to get them. And I think, Matthew, there was some questions about the cover cloth, different types of cloth you were using and where to get those. So I've seen those questions from folks. I think Claude asked about the tool, Fidel. And
which tool? The Bradford?
There was two talked about, right? There was the broad fork, and then there was the one you were describing as like intertwined.
Yeah, the one that I wish I totally forgot about that one to take a photo from. It's called the cultivator, and it looks like stars, you know, and they're like get interconnected to each other. And when you buy one of them, it comes just one star with three of them. So what we did is that we connect them all and we made it 9 times the size. So that will cover a whole bed just in once. You have to do it yourself. You're gonna have to weld it, but that definitely works and helps a lot to mix the soil and the nutrients without using the tiller. And then the broad fork, there is a whole diversity of broad forks. The one that we use the most is like the one that Matthew shows you on his presentation, as well as mine. The metal ones, because there's some of them made out of wood, and those ones, they break really easy. The metal ones would last a whole much more time than regular. And the other thing too is when you break the soil, you don't want to flip it either. Just break it and let it breathe. I used to do that before too. That's what I thought it was about. So you go deep and then you flip the whole soil, and once again you're taking the good quality soil, the humus, to the bottom. So what I've been learning is that you just go deep, break it, and then take it out, and then again go deep, break it. We just want the air to go through the soil, and then after that you can just start to prepare the soil. I saw another question too of how deep to go with it?
Yes, that's the question. Yeah, from Myra. What's the best depth to till?
So once again, Myra, we wanted to keep the best quality of the soil, the 4 inches on top. So the less deep you go, the better. So once I prepare the soil, like I told you, I dig the trenches, I do the high beds, and then I put the nutrients on top. That's when I use the tiller. So I use the tiller just really to mix that on top of, I don't want to go deeper than the 4 inches. It's just really something nice and gentle to keep the good quality humus, the good microorganisms on top. So try not to go too deep, because then once again, we don't want to lose the good quality microorganisms going to the bottom.
Thank you, Fidel. I see 3 more questions. I think some of these could be for both of you. I think the one about cloth is for Matthew. It's about the cloth that you were talking about that's not that black plastic. There was questions about where do you get it, what is it called, and is it made from? Oil derivatives. There were some questions about that cloth you showed. And then just so you both are aware, there's another question about where do you get your compost and how much do you use per year? And then also about a seed low-till drill. I think there was a question on using the drill.
Okay, so the weed cloth that we use is, yeah, I mean, it is a form of black plastic. It's sort of like, it's small threads of black plastic woven together in a mesh, and then underneath there's a felt that keeps the whole thing together. And we get it, I've actually ordered it direct from the manufacturer in Denver. I'm trying to remember the name. But I'm pretty sure you can find a product like that here at landscaping supply places. So like Plant World would probably have a similar product. I want to say it's Western Landscape and Supply. That's because when I was getting started, I had to order a whole pallet of these things. So I just went straight to the manufacturer in Denver. But what's great about the cloth as opposed to black plastic is you can reuse it. So we roll it up every year and then roll it out again. So I'm expecting to get, well, I expected to get 5 years, and then everything I bought 5 years ago is still going. So maybe 10. So it's.
That was great. That's one of the questions, Matthew, was how long? So you've been able to do 5 years with it, and you're certified organic. So Yvonne was asking if you can be certified organic with that.
Yes. Well, the T-tape that we use to get water to our crops is also made out of plastic. So there, it's, yeah, the plastic is allowed under organic rules. Again, it's important though that you don't, that you clean it up properly. What I've heard is with the regular black plastic stuff is that there's more and more evidence that the microplastics are getting into the soil and even into the food that's being grown. So, I really like this because it comes off cleanly. I'm not that worried about microplastics and all of that stuff. Thank
you. So to either you or Fidel, there's a couple of questions. One about where you get your compost, how much you use per year, and another question for both of you about from Chili Yazi. Hey, Chili from up in Shiprock. Is tilling preferred over disking? And there's more coming in, but let's just start with those two. Where you get your compost and how much you use per year, and then do you prefer tilling over disking? It's a question I think for both of you.
Okay, I'll go first. So we get our compost from Soilutions here in the South Valley. And I, especially when I was getting started, I really use a lot of compost. So it's I get about a cubic yard for every 400-foot bed that I plant. It ends up being like a 5-gallon bucket goes on to about 10 to 12 feet of a row. And that's a lot of compost, but it seems to work.
All right, I'm gonna tell you my experience about that question too, because I've been noticed from the way that I was educated with the compost, and I even think the compost should be a topic for another meeting. But by now, I've been noticing, for example, as a part of the trainer program, as a trainer, some of the farms that we have been working, even just between us, they use too much compost, thinking that the compost will be the solution for a sick, once again, for a sick soil. So in my case, for example, and the size of what you saw on my cold frames, those are 30 feet wide for 96 long. Well, I only use 3 buckets of compost per bed. 3 buckets, 3 to 4. So that makes that I may end up using 2 square yards per year every time I'm gonna work on my fields. I don't use too much compost really, and I've been seeing that it really works good. This is the way my mentor teach me with Don Bustos, and what I've been seeing is like, if we wanted to have good quality soil, why do we have to use too much compost? We better get good quality soil from Soilutions. They sell good quality soil already. Compost is a good. What's the main purpose of compost is to maximize what the microorganisms does, to create a good net between them. So I believe, and this is what I heard also from the biodynamic classes, that if the soil is good, we don't need to use not even too much nutrients and compost. So in my case, I only use 2 square jars per year, and I've been also producing my own biodynamic compost, and I've been using it without any other nutrients, and the soil has been working great. So it's just a matter of how we have been developing our formula. Matthew has his way to do it, I have my way to do it. They both work good because so far we have been going through troubles and troubleshooting, and compost is not going to be the solution for good quality soil once again, but it works. So it's just for you to know that in my case, I don't use too much compost. I do use it, but I don't overdo it.
And let me just add that, yeah, I mean, I think soil health is definitely a journey rather than a destination. And one of the things that I've been asking myself is, at what point do I go down on the compost? Like, do I need to use this much every year? When I was getting started, and I did have some poorer soil in some of the fields, I felt like it was necessary, but I do worry about overuse. It might bring in too much salt, or I don't know. There could be consequences. So it's really nice to hear from Fidel, who's been doing this for longer than I have, about, there's variations on all of this. There's not one answer.
Yeah.
Right.
And we're over time, but there are 4 questions.
We can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Well, we do, but with a funny voice.
Funny voice. Yeah, okay. There's like 4 more questions. You guys have a few more minutes.
Yeah, we're fine.
Okay. So two of the questions are similar. People are asking about, if you have sick soil, what's the best thing you can do? Someone else is saying, I didn't have time to cover crops, so what's like the number one thing I should do for my soil? So either of you have thoughts on that? Those kind of go together, I think. And then Chili is asking about disking versus filling.
There's some kind of reverb. It's really hard to understand.
Yes.
I can, I'll just re-summarize. So one, Mr. Yazzie said, is disking or tilling, is one of those better or worse? We can start with that one, maybe.
Disking will be better. Disking, that's what I've been realizing. And that was also a recommendation. Tilling versus disking will be better. And there is a time to do it, which is during the winter time. You don't want to do it during the summer, because that's really going to affect the soil in a negative way. But once again, tilling is just going to flip the soil and move the good quality one to the bottom. And disking is just going to break the soil and soften it for us to be able to work easier with it. And my experience.
Would you elaborate on the definition of disking and give an illustration? Maybe you did earlier when you had the men out there working in the field and they were just lightly moving it with not a shovel, but something else. So I don't know exactly what disking means.
Disking is an attachment that you just, Angelina, can you show where we have the tractor working well, that one right there is a rotor tiller. There is another one which is the how's it called? The one that flips the soil.
The plow?
The what?
The
Plow.
plow.
The plow, right. See, right there, he's plowing. That's one way. That's what you really, this is the most disturbing. And then you got the rotor tilling, which is the one before. We are not using any disc right there. This is years ago. But the disc is an attachment, just like the tiller or the plow, that you just attach to the back of your tractor. And literally, those are discs. And all they do, they don't go too deep. And the way they shake, they break the soil, but they don't flip it over. So that was a good recommendation from the biodynamic program. Try not to use equipment, but if you have to, you better use disc. There we go. That's the disc. If you want to use the disc, it will be so much better than using tillers or plows.
All right, didn't you say, excuse me, at the beginning, I'm forgetting the word. You used a word like break something, break fork. What was it at the beginning?
The Bradford. No, the Bradford is another tool. There is a hand tool.
That? Okay, and what is the difference between that? I think this is really important to really amplify on. Maybe we can do this next time. Yeah.
See, that's a Bradford.
Oh, say it again. Right here? The green?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And then you're just walking. That's the one that you just go along with individually and without using any kind of mechanical equipment. Is that right?
Well, that's mostly to break the soil and let it breathe. That's
a hand tool.
Right.
And it's specifically designed not to turn the soil over. Like Fidel said, it just opens it up and helps it breathe and
broad fork right there
for the roots.
Okay.
Yeah, and then maybe in our last minute, just those two questions that go together, the one about what would be the number one thing you would do if you have sick soil, or the number one thing you would do to get ready this year if you didn't get to cover crop?
What are we going to do if but is the soil, can you repeat the question again?
There were two, but they're similar. If you don't have good soil, number one thing you would do. And then someone else said, we're on a mostly bare soil lot. It's too late to get a cover crop in. Now that it's warming up, what's the number one thing we can do to regenerate the soil? I thought that was similar. If you and Matthew have recommendations, and then we'll wrap up.
I really like covering the soil to begin with. So, if you can't cover crop, you could put some straw mulch on top. And then when you add water, you're going to start generating something. I think what's hard about that question is that soil health works best when a bunch of different things work together. But I think a good place to start is just figuring out how to get the soil covered. Because if you don't cover the soil, when you add water, the weeds are going to be much better at growing in poor soil than anything you try to grow.
Right. And then I will, so if that was my problem, I will plant cover crop for the season. So it's late to plant cover crop. Now we're preparing the soil for 2021, the way we live, right? So the best thing is to prepare it in advance. But if you already got to the time of planting and the soil doesn't look too healthy and you want to put some cover crop, maybe what I will run the risk to do will be plant cover crop, and in the middle of the cover crop, plant something that will grow, like leafy greens, the big ones, char, cake, collard greens. I won't plant salad mix or lettuce or spinach because those definitely need the whole bed, and the space that the cover crop is going to use, it may take away from those plants. But if I plant something that will help me to get some income and also take care of the soil by cover cropping, I will put cover crop of the season, which is we're getting to the springtime, and then plant something that you can grow during growing also the cover crop.
Yeah, maybe I should share the story of one of the plots that I grow on now. 20 years ago, it was a junkyard where everyone in the neighborhood dropped their trash, old cars, all kinds of crazy stuff. And they cleaned it up. And so Miner, the guy who I partner with, he was farming it, and he grew Sudan grass for 3 years on it just as a cover crop because the soil was so poor that he wanted, he just wanted to get something that he could grow and mow. And I think one of the traps that we get into is we think, oh, well, this is annual agriculture. I have to do something this year. But, a garden requires 10 years of thought and planning to really achieve its maximum potential. So, maybe if you're starting on a bare lot, look into cover crops that go in for the whole year. I mean, alfalfa is one that grows without much nutrients, or like I said, Sudan grass tolerates the heat really well. I've always heard a mix of cover crops is better. So if you were to get, 4 or 5 different cover crops and grow it for a year and then just mow it and let all the material from the mowing fall on the ground, then by next year, the soil is going to be a lot healthier already.
Thank you, Matthew. And I know we've lost about half the group, so it was great to have almost 60 people here today. And I know there's more questions, so feel free to contact the AFSC office. There's our phone number, email, website. We'll send you the recording. But if you have questions for Matthew and Fidel, feel free to contact us, and then we can reach out to them with a bunch of questions and get back to you. So that's one way to continue the conversation. And we will be having more peer-to-peer, farmer-to-farmer learning. This was number 2. So we'll be hoping to have another one in the spring. And just always happy to have you reach out to us if there's topics you'd like to hear. It sounds like compost and soil are a big interest. So thank you for your time, Fidel and Matthew, for all of your knowledge, and for all the folks who joined.